Welcome back to PDM Vlogs. I don't know how much of the previous video I've actually included. The audio wasn't great because I forgot to plug the microphone in because I am a genius, but we are talking about this Pixco Pentax 2 micro four thirds focal reducer, also known as a speed booster, although I don't know if Metabones actually own a copyright on that word, but we'll call it focal reducer just because that's what it was listed on eBay. So I've had it for a few weeks now. I've had a chance to try it out, and I can safely say I've been very impressed with this. It cost me £65 on eBay, UK dealer as well, which is always great. It didn't give me any kind of brand name, which was weird because actually considering it's a cheaper thing, this came in quite a nice box, and it even came with this as well, which is a nice little carry bag, nice little touch by Pixco as well. So I bought this focal reducer for a number of reasons. I have been buying some vintage lenses recently, such as this Vivitar 28mm f2.8, this Chinon 50mm f1.9, and this Pentax. This is a really nice lens, by the way. It's all metal construction, and I discovered the other day, built-in lens hood, very, very nice. This Vivitar 135mm f3.5. So I've been buying those instead of buying native lenses. I do own the Panasonic 25mm f1.7. That's a great lens, but that's still minimum of £100. And then if you want some of the other prime lenses with a wide aperture, you are going to be paying a few £100s, and I just needed something that wasn't going to break the bank. I'll have reviews on all of these lenses in future videos, but for now we're mostly just talking about this focal reducer, although some of the quirks and characteristics of the lenses will come into play during the review here, and I'll explain all about that later in the video. So the other reason I bought this focal reducer was to go alongside my regular adapter, which is by K&F Concept. Really impressed with this, by the way. K&F Concept do some of the best adapters especially for micro four thirds and mirrorless cameras. This was something I bought for maybe £10 or £15. And obviously that just straight converts these lenses onto the micro four thirds sensor, giving a full frame crop factor of 2. So this 50mm becomes a 100mm. Watch out for fingerprints on this. It's very, very easy to do that. This is why a microfiber cloth comes in very, very handy. So as well as owning this standard adapter, I wanted to make more use of the field of view of these full frame lenses. And so it made sense to buy a focal reducer. Now, I thought that focal reducers were going to cost me hundreds of pounds. Even, you know, the Viltrox, which is the cheaper alternative to the Metabones, is still at least a couple of £100 normally. But I didn't factor in the fact that most of them include electric elements, which I don't need because these are all fully manual vintage lenses. I could have looked at going to like Canon FD or something, but I saw a really great deal on Pentax, and I've used Pentax 35mm film cameras during photography that I did at AS level, and I always remember they were very good. I wanted to make the most of the field of view. I wanted to get the extra stop of light, so this would essentially convert this into about an f1.4-ish. So yes, this is giving me a times 0.7 reduction. So this converts my micro four thirds into about a super 35mm sensor, which is just, I don't actually know, I think it's just a bit bigger than APS-C. It converts it from a 2x crop factor into about a 1.4, 1.5 crop factor, which is a lot more manageable and makes something like this 28mm into about a 40mm full frame equivalent, which is pretty usable and moderately wide compared to what this would be with a 2x crop factor. I want to use this alongside this adapter to essentially give me two focal lengths. So full frame equivalent with both these adapters. This one will give me 100mm, this one will give me about a 70mm. Build quality. I mentioned it earlier, I'm really impressed with the build quality. It's all metal construction with the glass element that comes right up to the very edge of the reducer. Again, I was really surprised by the quality of this, especially for the price I paid. However, there is one thing to note. It is a little bit stiff when putting some of the lenses on, specifically anything using the PKAR mount, which is more or less the same thing, but for some reason this 28mm, when I put it onto this one, is a bit stiff. You gotta give it a proper push. It does go on, but it just sort of feels a bit stiff sometimes. Small thing, I can't really complain too much because, you know, I could be paying hundreds of pounds for one of these things, so I'm not really too annoyed, but it does make me a little bit uncomfortable. I don't really want to ruin the lens by constantly having to not forces it on, but certainly doesn't go on as easily as the 50mm or the 135mm. Okay, we're going to take a look at some real world tests now. First up, we have a comparison. This is the KNF concept mount, and I'm using my 28mm f2.8. As soon as we switch over to the focal reducer, you see just how much focal length and light you actually gain back just from one stop of light. Exactly the same for the 50mm at f1.9. This is fairly zoomed in, it's about 100mm equivalent, but as soon as you switch over to the focal reducer, you get a lot more back, and just see how much light that actually gains back. It's completely clipping that, so I'd actually have to turn it down using my ND filter. And then with the 135mm in this shot wide open in both adapters, it just falls apart. But as soon as you stop it down to about f5.6 to f8, you'll notice that it's really, really sharp in the next shot. And it's really, really usable, and what's amazing still is the fact that it's sharp across the whole image pretty much, which is something that you don't necessarily see a lot in vintage lenses. Next up, we have a sharpness comparison between both adapters, and you can see from these images that wide open, of course, is softer than stop down. What's most interesting with the focal reducer is it just shows more of the lens's imperfections. So around the edges you can see chromatic aberration and softening, whereas the centre is a lot sharper. Obviously with the normal adapter you've got a crop factor of 2, so you don't see as much of that, and when you use the focal reducer you do see more of the softer edges, especially on the 28mm. Now, this is by no means a scientific test. This was just shot at my 4K monitor, and I couldn't even fit the 135mm into my office because it's quite a small office. What this does highlight is that while they are still good quality and they're great value, vintage lenses do suffer from softening around the edges. That's just the nature of them. Obviously modern lenses don't have that issue so much, but it is something to consider if you're looking to buy some. Also, I can confirm that focus peaking on the GH5 and GH4 does work with this adapter and these lenses, which is really, really helpful for setting focus, although I would still suggest doing a pinch to zoom and making sure you've absolutely nailed it before you start filming. Next up, we have a quick comparison between my 12 to 60mm and the prime lenses. Of course, being faster, they look much better in low light and of course produce a much nicer shallow depth of field. However, I will say the 12 to 60 is sharper, but not by too much. I would definitely choose to use these primes over my 12 to 60 in situations such as this, where I've got the camera on a tripod or locked off, as I think it looks a lot nicer. So the rest of these video clips are just things I've shot out and about. This is of course my lovely dog Muffin, and this is just a shot out of my window when the postman first delivered the focal reducer. I'm really impressed with it. These are shots done of Adam, who will be very, very proud and very, very happy that he's been included in the video. You do notice here that you do get more flaring. I think it is from having the extra glass element. I think it is just a trade-off of it. But by and large, it looks great. I'm not noticing so much, especially when I'm filming a subject like this, I'm not noticing the softening around the edges as much. So the rest of these video clips are shot at 4K 60. I took Muffin out for a walk yesterday and my brother came along, and these close-up shots of Muffin look brilliant. I'm really happy with them, they look fantastic. Of course, when you cut to wider shots such as this one, you do notice the softening around the edges and some chromatic aberrations. Of course, cutting here, you can't notice it as much, but in the next shot, you can see, obviously, when the bench to the left, you can really see it's quite soft there. But that's just kind of part of the charm of having vintage lenses. You know, you don't get a perfect image. That's kind of why you buy them, but they have character. And also, by the way, that dog was adorable. Like, it was just so cute, and I'm so glad I got that moment there, and she was really sad when they walked off. It is also worth noting that I have done a small amount of colour grading to this, just a bit of exposure correction. I've added a lot as well, just a bit of contrast to it. Another point about specifically using vintage lenses and less about focal reducers is that you do lose some contrast. Now that's not actually necessarily a bad thing because you can put it back in. It's best that it's got too little than too much, but it is something to consider when you're trying to match your footage in post. This obviously isn't the sharpest image in the world, but we are shooting at f1.9 on the 50mm currently. But I really love the bokeh effect. It's a slightly swirly effect and quite imperfect, and I just really like the look of it. It's something I'm definitely going to want to use for weddings and for music videos. And I really love the effect, and for what, £24, you can't really go wrong with that, to be honest. So the 135mm was actually a pleasant surprise. I was a bit unsure about it because I'd struggled to get a really nice sharp image, but I stopped this down to about f5.6 and I love the results. This is actually the sharpest lens, although granted I was using the other ones wide open, but this is sharp across the board, as I mentioned earlier, and it's a really impressive image. So the great thing about using this focal reducer, and any focal reducer for that matter, is the fact that because obviously I have to stop this lens in particular down quite a bit, it means that I can still use it in darker situations where I perhaps wouldn't be able to use it with just my regular adapter. Also, another point to make is that while you can't focus to infinity by using the markings on the lens, you can focus fully to infinity equivalent basically. You just have to rely on pinching to zoom and making sure you got your focus exactly right, like in this shot, which is perfectly sharp, obviously stopped down a little bit, but it's very, very usable. Also, I have to make a quick point that, sorry, my dog is adorable. She is 10 years old, believe it or not, and she acts like a little puppy. She is ridiculous, but we do love her, and she looks great on film. So in this next shot, you can see there is a flare, sort of a bluish flare, slightly to the left of the center. And now I'm not sure if this is to do with the focal reducer or if it's to do with the lens, because in this shot you can't see it so much, but in the next shot on the back on the 28mm you can see a slightly sort of bluer, lighter haze there. So I do wonder if it's to do with the glass element shooting into the light. It's not noticeable a lot of the time, like in this shot you can't see it at all, but it is something to be aware of, especially if you are going to be using it to work with clients. So there's definitely shortcomings both with the focal reducer and with the lenses, but nothing massive. Like, I can still 100% recommend using this, and I will use this for client work, especially for weddings and music videos and anything more artistic. You just kind of need to work around the shortcomings, and you can get some great results with them, as I'm really happy with the stuff I've shot here. So yes, I definitely recommend this. It gives you much more versatility, you can use a lot more lenses, and you can make the most of their actual focal length rather than just get a full straight crop factor, which is really nice, and obviously an extra stop of light is really nice as well. And you can't really go wrong with £65. Like, if you're not happy with it, like, it's not a huge amount of money spent. You know, it's not like if you spend £400 on something more expensive and then don't like it, then you have to worry about selling it. This really isn't going to put you out of pocket that much, and if I do break it, I hope I don't, buying another one isn't going to break the bank for me. So I definitely recommend it for that sort of thing. You can use it for corporate stuff. I think there's a lot of stuff I can use it for, and I think I will use it for as well. And I might look at buying like an M4 II mount, probably a Canon FD mount at some point. I think I'm going to look at, you know, really expanding my vintage lens collection, because you can just get so much for such a small cost. So yeah, I hope that's been interesting to people. I know I ramble, that's just my thing. If you have enjoyed this, obviously please subscribe, and subscribe to our main channel. That's where I upload all our finished corporate and business videos. We'll have plenty more coming, plenty more vlogs, plenty more reviews, and hopefully you find this interesting. If not, that's fine. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.